Hey readers, welcome back to another review. I'm very excited to finally get around to reviewing this one. This is one of the ones that I mentioned at the beginning of the year, was the book that I finished the day I recorded the What I Want to Read This Year video. So finally I'm actually reviewing it. This is Six Wakes by Mur Lafferty. This is such an interesting book. If you've watched a lot of other stuff on my channel, you know I've recently done a lot of murder mystery type stuff, lots of Natasha Preston, A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, all that stuff. So this is murder mystery, but sci-fi. It's really interesting because the characters in this are trying to solve their own murders, because basically the world has gotten to a point where cloning is common practice, and the characters in this have been cloned and are a 6-person crew, hence 6, that are on this starship traveling to another planet as what they think is like a colonizing mission. They're the only ones awake. Everyone else is in sort of stasis. And it's very, very interesting because as it's told, the clones, when they first wake up, they wake up to witness their own murdered bodies from the past session of clones, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word, but they also throughout the book, it kind of goes from what's happening actively then to what's happened in past lives of the various characters, and you sort of start to see the full story, and kind of understand how everyone fits together and why they are the people that were chosen for this, and it's very, very, very interesting. I also have to say, the end of this book is really, really interesting too, because it ends in sort of a unfinished way, but not in the way that Natasha Preston's books always anger me. It ends with sort of the implication that there's a lot more that does happen, whereas Natasha Preston, a lot of her books end with the implication that someone dies at the very, very last sentence. But this is really interesting because it's the ethics of the whole cloning thing is so fascinating in this book, because it talks about like these wars that happened and clone justice rights and all that stuff, and people on this crew of 6 were on varying sides of those in their past lives, and once that kind of information starts to get out, it becomes contentious on the ship. But it's so fascinating because so many murder mysteries are like trying to figure out what happened to someone else, and this is them trying to piece together what happened to them, and why they have 25 years of missing memory, because every time a new clone wakes up, it's supposed to have all of the memories of the past, however long it's been since they initially were cloned and got a mind map created and everything. But they are all missing 25 years, and basically are back to the clone that they were when they initially started the voyage. And it's so interesting how they have to kind of figure out all of their own pieces in it, because since they don't have their own memory, they're not even sure if it was them or not. Like, the protagonist is like, I don't think this was me, but I can't know what's happened in this 25 years. And that just makes it so fascinating, because I feel like in most of the other murder mysteries that I've read, the protagonist knows for sure it was not them that did something. And this is kind of the opposite of that, where they're like, all of us are suspects, including myself. But then they try to sort of figure out how to piece all that together, and they do, and I really like I don't even know if you can call it world building, since it's not really like a world, because they're just on a ship, but the technology building, I guess, because their ship has this whole, like, it's huge, because it's like an interplanetary voyage that's supposed to last however many decades, centuries, but like there's a whole area that's like a garden growing in the ship, and it's got like a pond and everything that artificial gravity is keeping in place, and then there's just so many really fascinating things about the technology involved with cloning, with like they can print their food from a machine that basically synthesizes things into food. It kind of reminded me a little bit of the Fabricator in Subnautica, if anyone knows that. But that's kind of what I thought of. But and like the technology, I need to be careful how I say this, because this is kind of could almost become a spoiler, but there's like an artificial intelligence type thing that controls the whole ship, and all the stuff about that entity. I'm being so careful here. But like all of that is just so interesting. And then I guess the world building part comes from sort of what Earth has become in this sort of technological future where people can be cloned, and there's kind of the moral issue of once people can be cloned and just wake up in a new body over and over again, it kind of cheapens the value of life, and people will be like super reckless, and like, is that ethical? And then there's like the religious aspect where various religious leaders are like, this is against God to clone people, like death is a natural thing that should happen, and this is unnatural and wrong and all that. And then the political stuff about all of the, like, do clones have rights the same way that a human does? Like, what are the laws that apply to clones versus humans? It's so cool, like, just the way that it's, like, dealing with all these questions that I feel like if that ever were to be a future, I feel like that would happen, because I feel like we're kind of in something similar now with AI. Not in terms of, like, does AI have rights, because that's not exactly the same, but sort of like this new technology that's sort of taking over a lot of stuff, and it's in some cases taking jobs away from actual humans. And yes, the people who use AI for those things don't have to pay an actual human to do the thing that the AI can now do for them, but is that ethical if you could hire an actual person, even if it costs you money? Like, I feel like stuff like that is kind of a topic that's in this book a little bit to an extent, especially with sort of the AI character. I cannot remember what the acronym stands for, but it's Ian. It's like intelligent something. I don't remember what it stands for, but like that whole thing is fascinating. And I feel like one of the things that I loved about Defy the Stars, that whole series that I reviewed, was sort of does a cyborg type artificial created being have humanity? Does it have maybe more right to exist than a human who might be an awful person, and all of that stuff, which I just thought that the whole ethical aspect of that was so interesting. And I feel like there's kind of a similar thing in this, and also the sort of sci-fi voyage in space kind of thing. And it's also so interesting because while it is contained where currently they're all just on this, to be fair, very large ship, at the same time it goes back into flashbacks of their past lives and brings in characters from different time periods, because some of them have been technically alive as clones for hundreds of years, being revived when their last clone dies. And so there are people who've been in like a war early on in cloning. There are people who've been kind of more recent, and it's really, really interesting to kind of see all those pieces and how those kind of made the people who they are in the book. This is a hard book to review, I think, which is one of the reasons why it's taken me so long, because there are so many different storylines kind of overlapping, and it's really hard to say too much without giving spoilers, because there are so many just fascinating details about everything, and I want to talk about it, but I also don't want to spoil anything. But I highly recommend this book. I think it's also interesting. I find the cover very interesting. I don't think I showed that enough. But this is also a scratch in the book because I got it used, so this is not actually part of it. I'll cover it. But it's interesting because I have no idea who this person is supposed to be. Because I don't know. It's a cool cover, but I also don't really fully know the significance of it in relation to the book. Also, these asteroids. But yeah, I feel like I have been in a lot of the murder mysteries I've been reading recently, one of which I will be reviewing today as well and recording for next weekend. But I feel like there's not enough. I'm tired of real world books. I like the sci-fi, I like the futuristic, kind of even dystopian, I guess, because there has been a lot of war, there has been a lot of tension and stuff about this whole situation. Also, in real life, I hate politics. I think it's important to vote and have input in politics, but I find politics awful to follow in detail. Like, I would never go out of my way to try to participate in politics in ways that I don't personally feel are really important to me. Like, I will vote for what I think is important, but I also won't just watch politics news all the time. And so I think that kind of carried over into my experience here, where there's one particular storyline that gets really political, and it's talking about, like, all the different representatives from all the different places and this conference, which is important, and it's, like, relevant to how the world is now, but I had to read each page of that like 4 times because I would just zone out halfway through because I'm like, politics, bleh. But other than that, it's really, really, really good. I think that the way that it sort of comes out that this is hard to say without spoilers. There is a specific thing that happened that caused the deaths of all the people initially at the start of the book when they woke up and found their own murdered selves. But beyond that, it's interesting because as the story goes along, not necessarily relating to the murders, but just in general, you start to learn that no character is completely innocent of things. Like, not related to the murder, but just in general. All of the... Well, and actually it's even said pretty close to the beginning. All of the people who are the crew of this ship are convicted criminals, and this is, like, their chance to leave Earth as the crew of this ship and have a new life where they're not. And so they weren't supposed to discuss their past offenses with anyone else, but it's interesting because they actually had more, I guess, influence on each other's lives than they initially thought, and everyone's kind of guilty of various things, and everyone's kind of got a valid perspective at the same time, which I think makes it so interesting too, because I love books where there isn't a black and white protagonist hero and a black and white villain that is 100% bad, 100% good. I like gray area. If there is a 100% bad villain, I want to know why, what got them to that point. Even if I dislike them and think they're irredeemable, what caused that? Like, if there's a hero who's way too overpowered and doesn't have any kind of weakness and is, like, too perfect, I don't really like that either. I need, like, vulnerability, I need nuance. So I really liked that about this book, because all of the characters have that. And it's another book where it's so interesting because there are so many details from the different storylines. It's very fun to try and piece things together before they're officially revealed in the book. And I feel like I got some of the things right. There's definitely a lot of things. So there were some where I was like, I didn't even think about that. That's true. But yeah, overall, I highly recommend this book, especially if you enjoy sci-fi, mystery. Also, just, like, all the ethical stuff is so interesting too. I also think it's a really, really, really interesting book because since it has the different perspectives, like I mentioned, some of the perspectives had me unable to put the book down, and then the, like, politics part, I was just kind of like, whatever. But, it is definitely a book that can be hard to put down, and I feel like if you have more interest in that kind of political storyline, that part would probably be hard to put down, too. But I highly recommend it. It's also, I think, relatively new. Its copyright is 2017. That was 8 years ago. That's hard to... I was like, this isn't that old. That was 8 years. Time is weird. But I think that it's a really underrated book, I feel like, because I've never heard of this book before I found it. I feel like there's a lot of sci-fi books, and people talk about kind of the main, really famous ones. Like, I know The Martian was huge, and the rest of the books by that author. Kim Stanley Robinson, one of his books, is one of the ones I'm going to try and read this year. I know he's huge in the world of sci-fi, and also he invented, I think, or is, like, credited with inventing the subgenre climate fiction. Like, there's these authors that everyone who enjoys sci-fi has heard of. This one, I feel like I know so many people who enjoy sci-fi. No one's heard of this book. Even when I showed it to them, I was like, have you ever seen this? Have you heard of this? And everyone's like, no, but it looks good. I want to bring attention to it because it is good, and I think that it is something that I would like more people to know about, because I want to bring attention to good books that aren't given as much attention as I feel like they should be, which this is definitely one of them. But for now, thank you all for watching this review. Let me know what you're reading currently, or if you've read this, what did you think of it? And if you haven't yet, please subscribe. It would really help me out. And keep reading. Bye!